Hi, thanks for joining today, guys. My name's Andrew McIntyre.
And I'm Tanya Boucher, and we're both account executives at Texas Instruments.
Yeah, and we're here to talk to you guys today just a little bit about our background and kind of where we started and how we got to TI. And then I've got some more questions for you here, Tanya, that I want to talk just to learn kind of more about your background and how you do your job and how STEM is a part of that, and just some of the perspectives and things that got you to where you're at. So I guess first, just a little bit about me. So I grew up in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I went to a small Christian school in Arkansas called John Brown University. So that's where I got my engineering degree in electrical engineering. And then after that, I stayed in and did a master's in business. So I joined TI right out of school. Did primarily, like I mentioned, an engineering focus for my degree. But as part of working at TI, there's definitely a lot that gets us into the broader technologies. So, and as Tanya mentioned, I'm an account manager for TI. So there's a lot of different responsibilities that are involved with that, kind of a jack of all trades in a number of things. But the primary goal is just working to help make sure that our customers can design more TI products onto their boards. So I'm working directly with engineers. So how about you, Tanya?
So, Tanya Boucher. I grew up in a small town in Michigan, Fenton, Michigan. Went to Michigan State University. Background also in electrical engineering. The one thing I will say is going into college, that's not what I thought I would be doing. The nice thing, and I've been in the industry now about 20 years. The majority of my career has been at Texas Instruments. The nice thing about our career is it does allow us to touch a lot of different aspects of both business and engineering.
Awesome. Well, you said, my first question here, you mentioned, you didn't think that you were going to be doing engineering going into school. So tell us a little bit about when you were in high school and before that, like what were some of your favorite classes?
Okay. Yeah. I was in high school in the mid to late 90s. So a very different time. I loved math. That was one of the areas I just excelled in school and enjoyed doing it. I took advanced classes in high school and quite honestly, my thought was that I would go to college to get a teaching degree to teach mathematics. When I started college, I was paired up with a guidance counselor who happened to be in the engineering department. And I will say at that time, you didn't have a lot of women that were going into this broader STEM type career path. So I spent a lot of time talking to her. She had a background in engineering, talked to me a lot about, what I liked about math and those different things, and actually kind of helped me put me on the path to declaring engineering as my major. So that's kind of how I got there, that, I could get an engineering degree, which would actually allow me to do a lot of things. I could teach. It would kind of give me a broader range of career paths that I could go down.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I guess, when you were growing up as a kid, did you know this was the kind of work that you'd be doing someday? Or?
I had no idea that, I knew engineering existed, and I remember a friend in high school's dad was an electrical engineer, and I remember asking him, what do you do? And he said, I sit in a lab or in meetings. And I remember being like, wow, I don't know if I want to do that. But this, we call it account manager, account executive, but sales engineer is another word that people would hear. I had no idea that existed, no idea whatsoever. Even as I was going through, I think it's a little more broadly understood now, but even if I was going through my college career, it was not a role that I knew even existed, really, until I went to a career fair where I met somebody from Texas Instruments who talked to me about what the role really was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and I would agree. I think, my grandpa's an engineer, so that was kind of how I knew about engineering, but I had no idea that a role like this even existed. And when I finished up in school, I was like, man, I enjoyed my engineering work, but I don't know if I want to sit in a lab all day. And
exactly.
So getting some business experience and then being like, man, this is a great way where I can still stay close to things that I love in the engineering field, but also do it from a kind of more of a business side.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So when you think about like kind of the typical day, at the office or at the office these days, kind of what are some of your favorite parts of your usual days?
Yep. I think that one of the greatest things about this job, and if somebody that wants to go into this, is there is no typical day. So you have to be comfortable to expect the unexpected, because you could go into your day thinking that there's certain things you're going to do, and you could end up, a fire comes up, and figuratively, and you end up doing something completely different. For me, the best thing about my job is I love the fact that I get to interact with so many different types of people and so many different types of technologies. Most of us go into engineering because we have some love of technology, I'm probably not the most technical person when it comes from a sales perspective, but I think the nice thing in this role is that there's a broad level of what you need to understand technically. We have some extremely technical salespeople that understand every aspect of a customer system. And we have folks that are more like me that understand the concept of it, but don't completely, know the ins and outs. I love that I get exposed to that. I'm always learning something new, learning a new technology. And I also love working with a flex team. I think the nice thing, they kind of refer to us as the quarterback in terms of the sales account manager. But we work, on any given day, I may work with 5 or 6 different people on my flex team, and just getting exposed to a lot of different ways of doing my job, a lot of, people with a lot of different talents. So I will say that I am learning something new every single day. I'm never stale in what I'm doing, and I'm exposed to different. I may call on, there's such extremes, customers that do things from wireless speakers to customers that are making huge, massive CT systems or major systems that are used in some sort of biology or, for today's day and age to produce vaccines, right? There's electronic systems that are helping us do all that. So I think for me, just that exposure to all these wide range of activities, people, and technologies is what I really love about doing this job. How about you?
Yeah, and I would agree that definitely the opportunity to learn new things all the time is what really excites me about the role that we do. And, it was something that I enjoyed in school, and I think saw the chance to continually kind of, broadening my horizons on learning new topics. And I'd agree with you. I'm not somebody that's a mile deep kind of person. I'm much more of the, a mile wide and an inch deep. But I enjoy being able to kind of continually push to new areas and learn about new things. And it's awesome to be able to, to work at a company where there are tons of people who are a mile deep. So when I find an area that, I think is interesting and new, there's usually somebody that's already, a subject matter expert there that can help teach me about it. So
that's a great point.
Yeah. So you mentioned this a little bit already, but, you talked about working in a flex team. So I guess maybe tell us a little more about what does the team environment look like? Do you spend a lot of time working on your own or working with other people, and how do you pull people around?
Yep. So the way we are organized within Texas Instruments is we have a smaller flex team. So myself, that from the sales perspective, I also have a flex team of 2 folks that are the more technical folks. So on one side of our product line, and then the other side, I have 2 people that help support me at my accounts. So they can go a little deeper into what our products can do, the specifications and things like that. So that group of 3, I work with day in and day out. So they're my flex team we kind of focused on the same account base, and we spend a lot of time together. But then beyond that flex team gets a lot bigger depending on different things that I'm working with on the customer side. As you mentioned earlier, subject matter experts. Even my technical flex team can't know everything about 50 to 70,000 different products. So we also have teams within Texas Instruments that either are the designers of the products we're selling, or they're working on the next generation products, or they're marketing folks that are helping us, teaching us how to sell their products. I also interact quite frequently from a sales side with our business people. So that would be planning, people that are helping figure out how to get our parts to customers. People right. When it comes to forecasting. So there's a big business component of our role too that's actually really interesting. And that can change daily or weekly. The next thing about our role as well is we also get to interact with from executives on down. So we may be working with a vice president to help us secure a business opportunity. But we're also working with individual engineers, as I mentioned earlier, who are designing the very semiconductors that we're selling to our customers. So that there's the core group of 3 folks that I work with, but that flex team is always changing depending on the dynamics of the opportunity I'm working on and the customer.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Well, and I would agree. I like that aspect of our job a lot too, just being able to see the full scope of what we do. And getting to work across the whole range. I think it just gets a really interesting view of, you get to see all the steps of how the process is, goes about, and how our products get made, and, from idea all the way to packed up in a box and out the door or somewhere, on their way to someone else.
Exactly. So. And I guess that's one thing I would add is for our role, for folks to understand our role a little better, that's kind of our responsibility. Is one of our
Yeah,
the roles is we pull those people in. So we're the ones that kind of, with our smaller flex team, we're the ones that kind of decide who are the folks we need to be engaged with and who are the folks that we want engaged with our customers. So that's kind of a nice thing, is we own that piece of it.
Yeah, I agree. And I guess we kind of talked about this a little bit just with some of the flex teams, but what are some of the other careers that are available, in this field in semiconductors, and how do you kind of see them as having similarities to our role and then also differences from our role?
Yeah. I think the really interesting, and I know it's changed a bit since I've started, but the nice thing about Texas Instruments is we have these training programs, right? So we both, I think you and I came into our technical sales training program. We also have what we call a field applications program as well. So the folks that I mentioned earlier that are part of my flex team, but they can go a little bit deeper, a little bit more technical in terms of our products. We have that role as well. So it's very similar to what we do, but again, there's a little bit more of a technology focus. Those teams you will find in the lab. You will find them working on not necessarily designing chips, but you will find them working to understand how our products work and how they can be used in a customer system. We also have marketing roles. So really, marketing person. Marketing is something you hear in any industry, but in our industry, it's really marketing. How do you take a technology or a semiconductor? How do you make sure that we're targeting the right end equipment, the right customers? How does our part have the right specifications for different industries? And their job is really to help support sales in terms of collateral, driving some of the business goals for that product. So I think that's kind of an offshoot as well. I think those are probably the three large ones. I might be missing one, so please jump in here if there's one I'm missing.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think, of course, I think those, like you mentioned, those are the main ones. And, obviously there are a lot more pieces at every part of the system. I think maybe the only other thing I just would appreciate about a place like TI, and I'm sure this is true at a lot of other, large engineering companies, is there's a lot of opportunity for us to kind of move between those roles. So, I know people that have started in one, like on a very product development, heavy side, and then moved all the way to sales. And sometimes you see it go the other direction as well, too. Probably not as often the other direction, but right. It is great to be able to kind of move between roles within a company.
Yeah, totally agree. And I guess the one addition I should make is even within our own roles, as we mentioned, you and I are both sales engineers or account managers. But even within that spectrum, there's a large range of roles. We have folks that focus on, one large customer or one division of one customer that may, be just robotics focused. And it's just that customer that they live and breathe every day. And we have that all the way to the other end where we might have folks that are focused on an entire territory, which could be hundreds of customers, all different end equipments. And it's, it's a different skill set, but it's still the same ultimate goals. And there's a lot of jobs in between that as well. Right.
Yeah, good point. So obviously this looks a little bit different for the last 18 months or so, as we're here in May of 2021, and we just kind of coming through COVID stuff. But with working remote, has been a big deal for everybody this past year. But of course, is an aspect of our job as well too. So, maybe talk a little more about what it looks like for being able to live kind of anywhere in the U.S. with this job, or, is it certain places that are concentrated in, or, kind of how have you seen that part of our job?
Yeah. I think you're right. COVID, it definitely, the way things look coming out of this may be different than how they were coming in. But if I just look at my background here at Texas Instruments, I started my career in Dallas, Texas. I spent time in San Jose, California, and then the bulk of my career now have been in the Boston area. So I think the nice thing about this job is basically there's opportunities where there's technology customers or where there's companies, using electronics or building with electronics, which at this point, for the most part, is pretty much anywhere in the United States. So I think, we have sales offices in most major cities in the U.S. So there absolutely is flexibility to try to target your role in a certain geographic location. I mean, obviously, coming out of the program, I didn't get to say, okay, I just want to live here. There obviously has to be an opportunity and a role there. I think that maybe that looks different coming out of COVID. I think we have learned to call on our customers remotely. Most of us, and the way we are kind of situated geographically is I'm located where kind of the headquarters of my customers exist, yet my customers have locations in other cities. I'm in the East
Right.
Coast, but most of my customers have large offices on the West Coast as well. So I think maybe coming out of COVID, maybe there's more flexibility to live, in other places. If your customer has a location there, maybe you can live there, even if it's not the headquarters. I think that's still to kind of be figured out. But that's the nice thing about this role. It doesn't mean you get to say tomorrow, I want to be in Detroit, I'm in Boston today, and that happens. But there's opportunities in those places. And that's the one feedback I'd give to the group today is being open and upfront with your management about your longer term goals, even geographically. And I think that's a nice thing in our role is there is opportunities to get to different places or to be in different places.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'd agree with that. And I think for me, that's even, kind of opened my eyes to places that I never would have thought to go. So in my time with TI, I spent a little bit of time training in our office in Minnesota. I spent some time in Atlanta, of course, now up here in the Boston area, but I didn't ever think I'd be spending any time in Minnesota and Atlanta.
Right.
So being able to, get experiences in those places and meet people and just kind of have, opportunities to get exposed to different culture has been really interesting. And it's not something that I really expected. I think when I started an engineering degree, I didn't think that it's something that was going to take me all over the place. And then, even with working with some of the accounts, I've had a chance to travel internationally and go abroad, and that's been really cool too. That's also not something that I really thought when I was, starting out going towards engineering that like, hey, this could, help me travel to Europe or to Asia and meeting with people all over the world. So I think that's a great part of our job.
Yep, that's a great point.
So I guess thinking about some of the skills, the STEM skills in science, technology, engineering, math, but also maybe some non-STEM skills as well, whether that's on the reading, writing side or, like language or business skills that you might have. Maybe tell us a little bit about how some of the skills you picked up, in school or in other areas that were kind of more formal learning areas and that you've been able to apply to your job and, kind of how those play out in your day-to-day.
Yeah, I think if I look at my engineering studies or in college, time management's a huge one. There's, as we talked about before, our role is very dynamic. There's a lot of things that need to be done in a lot of different places. So, the same way when you're in college, you really have to learn how to manage your time in terms of how much studying do you do, how much fun time do you get and those types of things. That's really, really important. I think in this role, it's easy to get pulled in one direction or the other. So really being able to manage your time based on your priorities. I mean, the same way in college, I think most people, okay, this grade is weighted more, so I'm going to spend more time here. It's very similar in this role. You need to really understand what your goals are, and that's how you should prioritize your time. So time management's huge. Communication's another one. We hear this a lot, but this is a technology role, but at the end of the day, it's a people role as well. So as you mentioned before, we're working with people all over the world, not just all over the United States. So really being really clear in your communication and understanding how to communicate to all different levels of people, business levels, technology levels. Something you say or email to a design engineer is going to be very different than something you may say to a vice president of a product group. And also what I said earlier, say versus email. How you come across an email can be taken a lot of different ways. So really understanding, being clear in your communication, being self-driven, right? There's a lot of things that we do on our own. I mean, obviously early in your career, there's a lot of development that happens at Texas Instruments, but also a lot of this is us driving our own business. So really being somebody that is self-driven and is comfortable with that environment. And then the technology, it's interesting because the technology, I think just the basis of learning that you get in college is important too, is how we learn different concepts. Because we're looking at different technologies with different customers, we are constantly continuing to learn. So taking, how we learned in college and applying that to, when I pick up a new customer that is making some new system, I spend a good amount of time in the beginning studying that system and trying to understand how does it work? What are the technologies and functions that they need in that system? It's very similar to what you're doing in college and how you're learning to learn.
Right, right. Yeah, sometimes I joke and tell people that I feel like my engineering degree in college was just a 4-year vocabulary degree to help me do my job now. So,
That's
I had to learn all the right terms, like, about amplifiers and data converters and power management to start having the conversation. So I know who to bring in to continue the conversation.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So this has definitely changed this past year. But just when we think about how technology's changed our jobs and the way that we go about it, what do you kind of think of as the big things that technology has caused to change?
Yeah, I mean, if I look at it, and I'm going to date myself a little bit, but when I was in college, when I started college, we had an inter-college email system. So people weren't even emailing each other outside of the network that I was on at Michigan State. So that's where I was coming into
Mm,
TI. TI had an inter-TI email system. And then when I started, emailing people outside of your company became a big thing. So I think just the internet is a huge piece of it, right? How we touched customers before was very different, and it's good and bad. It's allowed us to be a lot more efficient. We spend a lot
mhm.
of time communicating with customers over email. But there's a balance with that as well. Obviously, in the current environment, it's a little different, but having that one-on-one with our customers is super important. I think technology has allowed us to be more efficient, but it's something we have to be careful with as well, because you can also get sucked into a lot of the technology stuff. The one thing too is I think just the capabilities of the web and of going to somebody's website. I mean, Amazon helped us with that, right? We can go to a website and figure out what we want and get it all, the one touch buy. I think that's changed not only just the way consumers buy, laundry detergent. It's changed the way some of our customers go to
Sure.
market.
Yeah.
Sometimes they want to just go to the web and look up the parts. They don't always need us to be the ones that are helping them with that. So how do we continue to utilize those tools that we have online, but also make sure that we're still staying entrenched in touch with our customers? So I think
Mhm.
it's a good thing, but we also have to balance it by making sure we still stay engaged, because I think as all of us can, and especially over the last year and a half, it's very easy to get sucked into the technology and kind of lose focus also of the human element of that. So I think while it's been good, there's a balance there that still, we need to strike.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. And, I guess you kind of mentioned it a little bit of just kind of some of the skills you need to keep in mind. But if you think of what are the interests or abilities or skills that really help people to be successful in our job, what kind of stick out to you as the most important ones?
Yeah, I mean, just, if I think about where I was in high school at this period of time, or middle school, just a general curiosity. If folks have a general
Mm,
curiosity just in how things work or how technology works, it doesn't mean you want to understand it to the bite and the bit, but you just have a general curiosity in things. I think that's at this point in time, maybe where folks are, that's important. If you like
mhm,
people, if you like interacting with people, if you like, it doesn't mean, and I will say this, it doesn't mean you have to be an extrovert. We have a lot of, I would say, introvert extroverts that do this job. So it
Right.
doesn't mean that you have to be this crazy extrovert to do this. But I think in general, if you like engaging with people to solve problems, working with people to solve problems, for this point in time where folks are, I think that's a big one. Um, we talked a little bit about being self-driven. If you like dynamic work environments, if you want a job where you go in every day and the task is the same thing every day, you sit at your computer, and you're doing the same thing, this is probably maybe
Yeah.
not the role,
Probably
right?
not for you.
Yeah. Um, those are probably the main things, I guess, that I could think of. You probably have a couple to add as well, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that I think kind of the biggest two that stick out to me as well are the curiosity and the desire to interact with people. I think both those are things that if you're just naturally that way, sometimes people would get a little frustrated with me for asking too many questions. But I think that's something that served me well in this role is just being a really curious person and then enjoying to work with people. So maybe the only one I'd add is just being persistent, or maybe stubborn is a better way to describe that too. And I think that's true for, for someone like me, like getting an engineering degree was not necessarily easy, but I did it because I just was stubborn and I didn't want to quit. So I don't know. I had a lot of engineering friends who were really, really smart. And I'd say I was not usually the smartest person in any group that I was in. But I just was, stuck with it and didn't like to quit. So I think that's a great part. Like if you have that desire, whether that's from competing in sports, like I played a lot of sports growing up, or and was involved in different team activities. I think if you really have a passion for grinding it out and for pushing hard and being persistent on things too, then this is a great role as well. And that's somewhere that skill set gets really rewarded and is valued. So
yeah, that's a great point.
So yeah, and I guess maybe that kind of tees up the last question that I had here as well. Just if you could give advice to the students today, as far as what do you need to be successful in this career, or maybe just in a STEM field broadly, what would you say?
I think we talked a little bit about it already, but just the curiosity. I think it's important what you touched on earlier too. I am also not the most technical person in the room. I never was. There were concepts of math and things that I understood, but I would say for the students that may be watching this today, if you're sitting there and you're like, well, I don't know anything about engineering. I don't understand how things work. That's okay. I think it's okay at this point in time. I don't think any of us knew going into college what we wanted to do. I think a couple of the things that we talked about, being self-driven, liking to work with people, there's a business element too. So if people have interest in business, but they also have some interest in technology, but they may not be the most technical person in the room, that's fine. I think there's a lot of interesting things. That the one thing advice I would give to folks today is, even if you have a small level of interest, but you don't know what the job could be, spend time talking to people, spend time, these are great things where you can get some exposure to the job, but finding ways that you could spend a day, now it's maybe remotely, but a day on site with somebody, how do they do their job? What are the specific activities that they do every day in their job? Those are things that I think are important to do, and will probably help you figure out what type of role are you going to be successful in. If there's things that you absolutely hate doing and you're like, I don't want to spend the rest of my life, doing this or doing this activity, then that will probably help you kind of define what are some of the roles that you could do or couldn't do. But I think if there's a general interest in STEM, and I think we touched on a little bit earlier, for the most part, our roles definitely cover technology and engineering, but touch on all of STEM. If there's a general interest in that, there is such a wide range of careers and jobs that you could do from one end of the spectrum to the other. So even if there's a limited but a small general interest, I would say stick with it and try to understand more about the different roles that are out there. But there really is a lot of opportunity at this point in time. There was 20 years ago, but even more so now.
Right, for sure. No, absolutely. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you sharing your perspective there and taking the time to talk through some of these questions today. And thanks to everyone who was able to join us for this chat. And yeah, I don't know if Tanya, you have any final words?
No, thank you. Good luck to everybody out there. And thank you so much for the time.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.